Are used to his threats from the past. I don't know really. I mean, physically, he has got no more forces, you know, his own forces in Benghazi or the eastern region in general. I think all what he can use is either mercenaries or airstrikes.
There's an information war going on in Libya which mirrors the fighting on the ground. AlJazeera has received a large volume of video footage, apparently from various cities across the country. What's beyond dispute is the chaos on the streets and the danger which protesters often run headlong into. Here, for instance, there seem to be snipers on the roof of the building opposite. There's a small crack, and a man goes down, shot in the groin. But while the international media is now beginning to find ways into Libya, interpreting the direction events are heading in remains as difficult for people in the country as it does for the outside world. In his vitriolic rant Tuesday night, Colonel Gaddafi claimed bitterly that the media had concocted a web of lies against his regime to try to bring him down, though it's also worth bearing in mind that Libyan state television shows only demonstrations in support of Gaddafi and entirely one-eyed interpretation of events. The latest rumour, again unverifiable unless it happens, is that Gaddafi has threatened to blow up his oil pipelines, which would bring havoc to a country already beset by poverty and would have ramifications on oil prices across the world. The combination of this and all the violence means it's hardly surprising expatriates and migrant workers have begun to leave by the thousands. One of the few certainties at the moment, following the apparent decision by the international community not to commit to intervening directly in Libya's affairs, is that Gaddafi's fate rests with his own people and nobody else. Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera.
Well, our correspondent Huda Abdel Hamid sent us this from the city of Tobruk in Libya.
I'm here in Tobruk, about 140 kilometers away from the border between Libya and Egypt. Now, at the border, I saw hundreds of people fleeing Libya with everything they own, basically mattresses, sinks, washing machines, everything they own. Those were people who are actually Egyptian workers in Libya who came here to save money, and now they had to flee. Now, they described very violent scenes. They said that people were being killed in Baida and Benghazi, that they say happened a couple of days ago. One man told me there was a bloodbath. They did say that the situation is still very chaotic and people are extremely scared, especially after the speech of Muammar Gaddafi. People thought that would be a threat and they thought that they better leave now before waiting to see what would happen next. From what I've seen, I would say that the people of eastern Libya are the ones in control. Certainly there were no officials at the border. We were just welcomed through the border all along the road. We didn't see one policeman, we didn't see one soldier, and people here did tell us that they have all fled or are in hiding and that they are now in charge of this part of the country, meaning all the way from the border to Tobruk and then all the way up to Benghazi. They say that now they are going to keep the control and the security of this area, and they're certainly, as they say it, not going to allow any soldiers or security forces from the central government to come here. Where I am exactly, it's very calm, and from what people tell me, it's actually quite calm also in Baida and Benghazi. They say it's been quite calm for the past 24 hours. They do say, however, that militias, or what they describe as militias rather, are still roaming around, especially at night. They describe them as African men. They say these men speak French, so they think they're from Chad, but they're not sure. They say that these militias do appear on the roads, do cause really panic among the civilian population, and they do describe sometimes very strong and violent fights between the residents here and these militias. They do say that they still have to put under control that situation.
Well, let's bring in Jamal Al-Shayal, joining us live from Saloum in Egypt. That's very close to the Libyan border. Tell us about the number of people who are trying still to get out of Libya.
Well, David, they are in the thousands. At the last count, which was late last night, roughly 20,000 had crossed over this border crossing right behind me, which is the main land terminal between Egypt and Libya. Through the day, those thousands continue to stream in, like my colleague said, carrying anything from televisions to satellite dishes to washing machines, whatever really they can grab with them. But what it is most important to note is not necessarily the materials they are bringing with them, but in fact the tales that they bring with them, and those tales of shock, horror, death and destruction, which each one of them is almost rushing to anyone with a camera or anyone who seems to be a media personnel to try and tell them of what they say has been the scenes over the past 3, 4, 5 days in Libya, David.
Are we seeing simply Egyptians who've been working in Libya trying to get out, or are we seeing Libyans as well trying to find anywhere that's safer than where they were?
The vast majority are Egyptians, really. There have only been a handful or so of Libyans leaving, and those Libyans who have left have come out with memory sticks, with flash drives and other sorts of media equipment to try and give us pictures they say that the world must see, and then they go back in again. I've asked the military here whether they have any preparations for an influx of refugees if things continue to escalate, and they say so far they don't have any accommodation for that. It's also worth noting that the United Nations Refugee Agency is not present here, nor is there a Red Cross camp or any other sorts of accommodation if there was to be an influx of Libyan refugees. But so far, speaking to the Egyptians who are coming and asking them, are there any Libyans on the other side of the border who want to get out but can't get out, they say no, actually all the Libyans in the eastern part are participating in what they call the uprising or the resistance, as they put it, against Colonel Muammar Gaddafi.
Jamal Al-Shal, thank you for that. The Italian foreign minister is reporting that the death toll from the violence in Libya has now topped 1,000. Franco Frattini is also warning of an exodus of immigrants of what he described as biblical proportions from the country.
We have no complete information about the number of people that have died. We believe that the estimates about 1,000 are credible. We will have more information maybe from the international journalists that came in the area of Cyrenaic, in Benghazi area in Tobruk. But as far as I know from our embassy, the province of East Cyrenaic is lost to the control of the government of Tripoli, while in the other areas there are, I would say, riots, there are people shooting. It's a difficult situation, and unfortunately what we want is that the government ceases immediately violences.
Harry Smith's in the Italian capital for us, joining us from Rome. How ready, Harry, are the Italians and indeed other European countries for this massive number of people that could well be leaving Libya?
Well, as you join me, the interior ministers of 6 Mediterranean countries, all members of the European Union, are sitting down here in Rome to discuss exactly that point. What do they do if this crisis develops in the way that many are predicting? You've heard the sort of language that's being used, an exodus of biblical crisis. The Italian foreign minister has spoken of a tidal wave of refugees, 200,000, perhaps 300,000, wanting to leave Libya, not all coming to Italy, which is why we have so many nations represented here at this meeting.